Did you know? Many classic Nintendo 64 titles were originally very different to what gamers ultimately got their hands on. Though some N64 games only had minor alterations in gameplay and visuals, as is the case with titles like Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, some other games on the system would completely switch genre, or even end up with an entirely different cast of characters. In this video, we're showcasing some of the most interesting and drastic examples of Nintendo 64 games that completely changed from concept to final product. So let's kick things off with a title from one of the most important developers on the platform. British developer Rare is behind some of the most iconic and well-regarded games on the N64, including the third best-selling title on the system, Goldeneye 007. Interestingly enough, Goldeneye didn't start as an N64 game at all. In early 1994, Rare co-founder Tim Stamper and designer Greg Mayles arrived at a Goldeneye press conference at Leavesden Studio in London. The two came to the set to meet with the film's art director, Andrew Ackland Snow, and discuss an official tie-in game they were making for the Super Nintendo. As reported in Nintendo Power magazine, Rare had just begun working on a side-scrolling SNES prototype around February. We don't know much about the SNES version of Goldeneye, what it looked like, how it played, or if it even started full development. However, it's a safe bet that it would have been very different from the released version directed by Martin Hollis. Having an interest in video games since the days of the BBC microcomputer, Hollis applied for a job at Rare in 1993. His first role at the company was as the junior programmer on the arcade version of Killer Instinct, which was a one-year project by fewer than 10 people. Following the completion of Killer Instinct in March 1994, Hollis began tinkering with the new SGI workstations and wondered what he could do next. The SNES 007 project had petered out by this point, and Hollis asked Tim Stamper if he could direct a new GoldenEye game for the Ultra 64. Stamper said yes, and work began in early 1995 with a small team of Hollis, programmer Mark Edmonds, and artists Carl Hilton and B. Jones. The original 9-page document for the game envisioned the title as an on-rail shooter a la Sega's Virtua Cop, except in this case there was no light gun. At a certain point early on, the team decided to do both an FPS mode and an on-rail shooter mode. In addition to Virtua Cop, the team took heavy influence from Doom, plus John Woo action flicks like Hard Boiled. According to Martin Hollis in a 2007 interview with Gamasutra, Goldeneye was intended as a launch title for the N64 in conjunction with the film's November 1995 release. But this did not go as planned. The N64 got delayed in North America until April 1996, due to the chipsets still being finalized and major concerns about software quality. Making matters worse, the small team working on Goldeneye repeatedly missed their deadlines. The first year was spent creating an engine and designing art assets, with more staff being added later to help move development along. David Doak, who assisted with AI scripting and the overall design, was the first new hire. Junior members such as Doak helped give the game a slightly new vision, adding more of a Mario 64 influence rather than Virtual Cop. Elements such as the multiplayer mode, added 6 months before release, were being done as development sped up. GoldenEye's multiplayer mode originally had ex-Bond actors like Sean Connery and Roger Moore, a choice Nintendo's legal team was not a fan of. Much to the team's dismay, it had to be removed. The legal team did not appreciate the use of real-world gun names, insisting that every gun be renamed by Rare. The Clob, perhaps the most infamous gun in the game, was named in honor of Nintendo producer Ken Lobb, who worked with Martin Hollis years back on Killer Instinct. Goldeneye 007 would release in August 1997, roughly 22 months after the film it was based on, transitioning from an SNES game to an on-rail shooter and eventually taking the form we know today. But before we get into more N64 games, a word from this video's sponsor, Lamp Chronicle. Lamp Chronicle is a beautiful 2D platformer with Metroidvania elements, reminiscent of the much-beloved Wonder Boy series. The game has unlockable abilities such as an evasive dodge roll, being able to eat while moving, and more. Different sorts of food and potions can also be used to recover health, and other items can be collected, like lost pages, which are traded in for abilities. Lamp Chronicle also has Lamp skills which can be unlocked and used to the player's advantage. It even has discoverable pets throughout the world which can join you on your journey. The Buddy ability also lets players bring more pets along for the ride. Or if combat is more your thing, Lamp Chronicle has many weapons which can be found or crafted, such as daggers, swords, clubs, and maces, all with their own strengths and limitations to fit different combat styles. All these abilities and tools will aid you in fighting the evil energy of darkness spreading across the land, robbing people of their memories, and even turning some into monsters. Playing as the novice knight trainee Luca, who wields the Princess Lamp of Light, players must fight monsters, find the missing princess, and drive the darkness to whence it came. Lamp Chronicle has great reviews on Steam and is currently supporting early access, and the developers are eager to hear feedback from players like yourself. So if you want to check out this riveting 2D platformer, click the link in the description below. And now back to the N64 games. Released in North America in early 2001, the original Paper Mario is widely considered one of the greatest RPGs, if not the greatest, on the N64. Part of the game's appeal had to do with its unique and timeless storybook art style, which combined 3D and 2D elements onto a single screen. But believe it or not, the game wasn't always going to look this way. According to a year 2000 interview with Nintendo technical support Hiroyasu Sasano, developers Intelligent Systems spent close to a year and a half trying out different characters and aesthetics. At one point, the team tried using polygons via Silicon Graphics technology, but scrapped it as they worried the style would overlap the Zelda N64 games. They also tested pre-rendered graphics in the style of the original Super Mario RPG, but this quickly got scrapped as well. On March 5th, 1997, artist Naohiko Ayama proposed a new art direction utilizing a single rough piece of concept art he had created, a simplistic 3D world with paper-thin 2D sprites. The team approved the idea and it stuck for the rest of the development. It was decided early on that the game should be less of a sequel to Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, and more of its own thing. Despite this, the game was previewed as Super Mario RPG 2, as late as the Nintendo Space World presentation in August 1999. The name Super Mario Adventure was also used for a moment, according to a report by Nintendo Power Source. As for the game's badge mechanic, the team did not want the plumber to use actual weapons, so they opted to use an analogous customization system instead. A few badges got scrapped during development. One example was the Power of Rage badge, which put Mario into a berserk state with an extremely high power level. In that same 2000 interview, Intelligent Systems director Ryoto Kawade remarked, "For some reason, Power of Rage made him turn green when he was berserk. The programmer who created it was a Luigi fan, and I guess the idea was that if Mario became Luigi, it could be very dangerous." But the N64 was popular for more than just its first and second party titles. Not much is known about the first version of Bomberman Hero, the oft-forgotten entry in Hudson Soft's strategic and literally explosive series of titles. Surprisingly, the first version of the game did not feature Bomberman at all, instead starring Bonk, or Genshin, the caveman kid from Hudson's 16-bit side-scrollers. IA Studio, a Machida-based studio founded in July 1990, was contacted to help develop this Ultra Genshin game. IA had previously worked on the Bonk games for the TurboGrafx 16, SNES, and NES, so the decision to bring them on board made perfect sense. Production began in June 1995 and ended after just 6 months. According to IA Studio planner Shoichi Yoshikawa, in an interview with CRV of Game Developer Research Institute, the team was inexperienced in creating 3D platformers and struggled with turning the 2D elements of Bonk into 3D. The video game industry was transitioning fast, and Hudson and IA were having trouble adapting. Although Ultra Genshin got scrapped, the design lived on in the form of Bomberman Hero, released years later in 1998, with some of the Bonk DNA still intact. The development of Nintendo's offbeat Pokemon spin-off, Pokemon Snap, is a strange one, as it started life as an entirely original game franchise. In October 2010, Nintendo published an Iwata Asks regarding the then newly released Kirby's Epic Yarn for Nintendo Wii. The interview discussed the initial version of Epic Yarn pitched to Nintendo, which starred an original character named Prince Fluff, who ended up in a supporting role in the final game. The interview takes a quick shift as Satoru Iwata relates this change to Pokemon Snap, a game that some key Epic Yarn staff were a part of. Iwata said, "Originally, Pokemon Snap for the Nintendo 64 system was not a Pokemon game, but rather a normal game in which you took photos. But the motivation for playing the game was not clear. It took 3.5 years until the completion and release of Pokemon Snap." In early 1995, Iwata, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Shigesato Itoi began assembling the Jack and the Beanstalk team, a group of Japanese developers outside of Nintendo who could make Ultra 64 games with new and unique approaches. The trio realized that some Japanese development houses provided miserable conditions and poor outlooks, leaving many talented designers and programmers stuck in a rut. But Jack and Beans could get these struggling developers out of their current positions and into a better job. The first day of Jack and Beans was on August 20th, 1995, on the second floor of Nintendo's Tokyo office, dubbed the Table Tennis Room. Yoichi Yamamoto would serve as director, and the group began working on a photography game starring original characters designed by team member Shizu Higashiyama. It's unknown what these characters looked like, as they didn't stay in the game for very long. According to Iwata, Jack and Beans had trouble figuring out what players would enjoy taking pictures of, so they made a somewhat forced switch around 1996, replacing the original characters with ones from Nintendo's new sleeper hit, Pokémon. Snap was first developed for the Nintendo 64 disk drive, the Japanese-only add-on for the N64. However, due to long delays caused by poor N64 sales, Jack and Beans jumped ship and moved over to the regular N64. In addition, at least 2 stages would not make it into the final cut of the game: a safari level featuring the unused 64th Pokémon Ekans, and a haunted stage presumably featuring ghost Pokémon such as Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar. The German edition of Pokémon Snap Official Strategy Guide gives us a small glimpse of what could have been, revealing concept art for both levels not seen in other guides. In 1999, Jack and Beans composer Ikuko Mimori released 2 unused tracks from the haunted stage, proving that the level got far enough to have music composed for it. The music you are hearing right now is one of those tracks, which Mimori curiously lists on her website as a tune for the boss of a stage that was cut for various reasons. Keep in mind that in the final release of Pokémon Snap, there are no proper bosses. As of the writing of this video, this is the only evidence we have that they were ever planned for Pokémon Snap. Shortly after finishing Donkey Kong Country 2 circa October 1995, the game's team at Rare split off into 2. Half started on the third entry in the franchise starring Dixie and Kiddy Kong. The other began on a top-secret action RPG game planned as Rare's greatest SNES game, known as Project Dream, or Dream Land of Giants. The title was made by a 10-man group led by co-founder Tim Stamper. The game was kept secret during its early stages, but the known staff includes designer Greg Mayles, programmers Will Bryan, Paul Makachek, Chris Sutherland, artists Ed Bryan and Steve Mayles, writer Lee Loveday, and composers David Wise and Grant Kirkhope. Project Dream starred Edson, a misfit child in a fairy tale world entangled in a web of pirates in search of building a flying pirate ship. On his journey, Edson discovers Dinger, a snarky dog sidekick that helps the player dig out hidden items. The SNES version of Project Dream was a side-scrolling game that took influence from Japanese RPGs and LucasArts point-and-click adventure titles such as Monkey Island. However, realizing that the project was too ambitious, Rare decided to move Dream to the N64 after just a few months of work. In a June 2016 interview with official Xbox magazine, Chris Sutherland recalls the conversion process, saying, "Rare's first approach was to create flat sprites which were pre-rendered, which looked fine as long as you were going in a straight line. But as soon as you went in 3D, it didn't work. Project Dream was more limited 3D, so it would tend to be viewed from above for, say, a troll race that you're running around in, or maybe you're falling down a cavern. But there were certain sections where you're moving sideways that were tricky because as soon as you started to tilt the camera around, the sprites started to all interweave with each other and didn't quite work. We realized that the right thing to do was to move to 3D. Although we had a lot fewer polygons, we could still imbue some character into the characters and the world, even though that left us with a much smaller polygon count. It was still a lot of learning because we didn't know how to do cameras. It's fine when you've got a 2D camera, we knew what we were doing there, as we'd just done a whole series of games with it, but 3D was a whole new world for us. Project Dream was now on the N64. The game took a top-down route rather than isometric, and the fairy tale setting was replaced with more pirates. According to Greg Mayles, this was done to make it less childish, and give the game a broader appeal. Sadly, the ambitiousness of the title came with some problems. Project Dream used an elaborate floor system that stretched the polygons into previously impossible landscapes. However, due to the N64's hardware limitations, the system struggled to run at an acceptable frame rate. In addition, work on the recently started Conker's Bad Fur Day, then known as 12 Tales Conker 64, made Rare realize that the tried and true Mario 64 route was the way to go. RPGs were not the answer. Despite multiple playable prototypes getting made with over 100 tracks composed for them, Project Dream was being redone from the ground up. The first step was to remove the character of Edson, as Tim Stamper believed he was just too generic. At first, the team used a rabbit character that ran on 2 feet. This concept only lasted for a few days before being scrapped. Greg Mayles recalls the rabbit looking like a man in a suit. Another character, a big skater-inspired bear with a magic backpack designed by Tim Stamper, was met with a much better response. Rare immediately fell in love with the bear and decided to make him the new star of the game. Here was the creation of Banjo. Banjo's sidekick, Kazooie, was implemented a little later, as Rare needed something to justify Banjo's double jump animation. At first, a pair of wings sprouted from his backpack, which didn't make sense. Within 1 week, the first level of BanjoKazooie was made, and it took another 16 months for the game to be complete. BanjoKazooie was released in June 1998 and became the 10th best-selling title on the N64. In May 2015, Tim Stamper began posting old game material on his brand new Twitter account. Among the tweets was an ongoing thread teasing at the idea of a Project Dream prototype for the SNES, believed to be the only one still in existence. On July 25th, Stamper posted a single image of the game's title screen, proof that his prototype still worked. It was soon donated to Microsoft, where footage of the game was shown on Rare's YouTube channel. The current whereabouts of the prototype are unknown. Another Rare title that was significantly changed was Diddy Kong Racing. At least 4 other versions of the game existed before Diddy was even attached. After Killer Instinct 2 got released in the arcade in February 1996, the development team split off to work on 2 N64 games simultaneously. Half started on the upgraded console port Killer Instinct Gold. The other began on a real-time strategy game similar to the Command & Conquer series. The game, starring a caveman traveling through time, was conceived by a group of 4, Rob Harrison and co-founder Chris Stamper on programming, Lee Musgrave on art, Lee Schuneman on design. This idea did not last long. The RTS concept got scrapped after a month, and only a few 3D renders done by Musgrave, such as a few catapults and a woolly mammoth, were done. Shortly after, the team experimented on a fun racer a la Super Mario Kart, inspired by the adventure elements of Walt Disney World. Going under the name Wild Cartoon Kingdom, the racing game reused 3D assets from the RTS prototype. Musgrave's woolly mammoth render was now riding in a tiny star-spangled moped. 2 more characters, a donkey and a crab, were also included. Much like the production of Goldeneye, more hires from Rare helped bring things up to speed. Wild Cartoon Kingdom got renamed to the much blunter title Adventure Racers, and once again to Pro-Am 64, a reference to Rare's 1988 NES game RC Pro-Am. This version of the game had tricycle-style vehicles and starred a new character named Timber the Tiger. It went relatively far into production, and in June 1997, a playable demo was privately shown to Shigeru Miyamoto at E3. Miyamoto was impressed with Rare's work, and offered the company a Nintendo IP to use for the game's characters and setting. While picking Donkey Kong was tempting, Rare chose to focus the game on Diddy Kong, as the character was their creation, a choice which again impressed Nintendo. The development team initially hated the idea, but eventually accepted it, as Diddy's inclusion would help boost marketing. Keep in mind that until this moment, Nintendo had no involvement in the project whatsoever. In a 2014 interview with Nintendo Life, Lee Musgrave said, "Nintendo enjoyed the fact that we chose Diddy Kong over Donkey Kong. I think that it was us trying to build on the fact that Diddy was ours, and Donkey Kong was theirs." Diddy Kong Racing would release in November 1997 worldwide. In addition to Diddy Kong, several familiar faces would make an appearance. Banjo from Banjo-Kazooie and Conker from Conker's Bad Fur Day made their respective cameos. Timber the Tiger, the scrapped star of Pro-Am 64, remained playable but got pushed off as a side character, and the nameless woolly mammoth created by Musgrave back during the RTS prototype became Taj the Genie, and their patriotic moped became Taj's magic carpet. Did you also know that Nintendo 64 games like Banjo-Tooie and Ocarina of Time had serious anti-piracy measures? Or that there was at least one Mario game for the N64 to never release? If you want more N64 game facts, check out the videos on screen. And if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, please let us know in the comment section below. And subscribe for more facts from DidYouKnowGaming. See you next time.